Good morning, and thank you for enjoying it with a six-pack, the Scotty Six-Pack, the only podcast bringing you all there is to know in Wisconsin sports 6 days a week. I'm your host, Kedrick Stumbris, and you can follow me on the website formerly known as Twitter at Kedrick Stumbris, and follow the podcast at Scotty Six-Pack for the latest updates in Wisconsin sports. While you are here, if you could leave a nice review, 5 stars, kind comments, helps other people find the show wherever you are listening to this podcast, including on YouTube, youtube.com/@Scotty6pack. And today we are going to preview this Wisconsin matchup against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. We have an excellent guest to help us do that. It is Aaron Breitman of the Scarlet Faithful, who we'll bring in now to the show. Aaron, a Rutgers grad, a Scarlet Faithful himself, thank you so much for joining the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. And certainly an intriguing matchup, I think, for both teams. And yeah, excited to talk about it.
I think so too. And I think that this Rutgers program as a college basketball fan is a program that I think about as one of the more intriguing programs in the country right now. Obviously, you have it possessing one of the worst offenses in the country, but also one of the best defenses in the country. And then next year, it's bringing in a top 3 recruiting class in the country with 2 5-stars, not just 2 5-star recruits, but 2 of the top 3 rated prospects in the class. How weird is that for you to hear somebody say that about Rutgers basketball? Is that they are fascinated by Rutgers basketball right now?
Yeah, no, for sure. It is. It's definitely a strange place to be in. It's been a long journey. Rutgers, when Steve Peichel took over 8 years ago, they were. It's not even arguable. They were the worst Power 5 high major program in the country. Their Ken Pom, the 2015-2016 season was 279. They were just in a really bad place. Before Eddie Jordan took over the program, they had scandal upon scandal upon scandal. Every coach they had some type of demise in terms of leaving. So really, for about a 30-year period, it was a really rough go of it. And Steve Peichel has just kind of brick by brick, slowly but surely, built a sustainable culture, a winning program. It's in a little bit of an influx right now, just because all the changes in college basketball with the portal, with NIL. He's very much a developer, and we saw the height of this run so far with Geo Baker and Ron Harper Jr. and Caleb McConnell, and the player development that those guys, how they ascended into the success that they led the program to is really remarkable, and made it almost more satisfying. Because it wasn't that he was bringing in all these top recruits. They really just had a chip on their shoulder and were able to raise the level of this program quite a bit. And now you see the flip side of that with the recruiting, elevated to a point where it's at a level none of us expected it to be. So it's certainly exciting, but this has been a unique year as well because you had also, I don't think any program, I know I'm biased, but I don't think any program was hit harder in the offseason in terms of attrition through the portal with the late departures of Cam Spencer and Paul Mulcahy. The roster was essentially set at that point. There were post-grad players that left after the undergrad deadline and then the NBA deadline. So they were really handicapped in how they could replace them. And I think that's been a root cause for some of the early struggles this season. Some of the guys they did bring in are coming off of season-ending injuries last year. Mawat Mag, one of the best players, obviously last season for Rutgers, had that torn ACL in February. He got back into the action early December. They just had Jeremiah Williams finally eligible after the 2-time transfer rule went away, and then the gambling situation. So it's just been literally they've had one game all year, and that was the Michigan game last weekend where they had the entire roster available. So I think that's been a big reason for it. But there's also, I think, real hope now that they can build some momentum with how the roster is constructed and how the rotation has been kind of developed in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, and let's dig into one of those players you mentioned at the very end there, which is Jeremiah Williams, who comes into this Rutgers roster now. He spent one season last year at Iowa State, which I mean, in hindsight, is probably a decision that he regrets. Unfortunately for him, has just the worst year you could possibly have in Ames with a season-ending injury, gets caught up in an underage gambling scandal as part of that whole investigation to the University of Iowa and Iowa State athletes. But now that's all cleared up. He's cleared to play. And he has been someone who is bringing a little extra juice to this Rutgers offense, which we started the conversation saying has not been that great, but he has double-digit scoring in his 2 games in a Scarlet Knights uniform so far. So, is Jeremiah Williams the cure? What can he bring for this Rutgers offense that is different than what we've seen in the first 3 months of the season?
Yeah, he's been a total game changer. I had heard and been told by quite a few people within the program that, they really had high hopes for him. And, he was able to practice throughout. So that was the positive. And I actually think the whole mental part of it, just for the team as a whole, when you're practicing with a player that is going to make you better and you can't play in games, I do wonder how much of a grind that took mentally on the entire team. And then now that he's back now, you just see the impact he has on the floor. He's a veteran guard. When he was at Temple 2 years ago, he had a top 100 assist rate in the country. He's an unselfish player, but he really, a big struggle, I think, for this team has been they haven't had a true point guard. Derek Simpson, has filled that role at times. But I think he's more natural off the ball as a 2 guard. And he's played with a lot more confidence now that Jeremiah's been there. And he's someone that with the ball in his hands, he gives you confidence. He plays with composure. He has poise. He has the ability to get downhill now and create shots either for himself near the rim or for his teammates. It's really helped Cliff Amori in the last couple games, just in terms of getting easier baskets on the move in open space. Defensively, he can defend multiple positions. At one point, he blitzed Jameer Young on a double late in the game to get a breakaway. Transition layup. He's had an offensive rebound where his athleticism was, I don't think anybody else other than Cliff could have done that move on the team. So he just brings them a lot. But more than anything, I think it's his confidence. And also he's so happy to be back on the court in games. It's almost been infectious to this team. They were playing so tight, so tense. They've obviously been shooting terribly all year. And I think everybody kind of relaxed. Michael's been able to, I think, tighten the rotation to where he always kind of wanted it to be. And it's just helped across the board. And the last 2 games to win back-to-back road games has obviously been a huge boost for this program and this team. And there's real hope now that maybe they can really get back into the thick of it. NCAA tournament hopes are obviously way out there still, but even if they could just climb into respectability in the middle of the pack at the conference, I honestly do feel like it's realistic now, especially the first half of the schedule was front loaded in the Big Ten, and this second half definitely is more manageable. Not that any league game is easy in this conference.
No, it's not. But one other player who's shown himself, year over year to be one of the best in the Big Ten is Clifford Amori, Rutgers starting center. He was just named either a day or 2 ago to the Naismith Award watch list for the nation's best defensive player, coming off an all Big Ten defensive team year already. Clifford Amori does so much well, and as a consumer of the whole hog of college basketball, I'm wearing a University of Texas Rio Grande Valley hat right now. I love me some college basketball. Clifford Amori is one of the most unsung great players in the sport right now, in my opinion. And he blocks he has a ridiculous either nearly or is just clearing 3 blocks a game, has one of the best block rates in the country according to Ken Pom. Beyond his individual accolades, what does he bring to this team that is so special, and what, if anything, does he do to elevate the rest of this Rutgers defense?
Yeah, he's been fun to have. He was actually, it feels like a long time ago now, but he was the highest rated recruit that Michael had brought in for a long time. And he's another kind of example of developing, even though he was a 4-star top 50 recruit. He was pretty raw when he got to Rutgers. He hasn't played basketball that long. He didn't start until his teen years. He was a soccer player. previously. So, he's still offensively, things don't really come naturally to him. But he's so gifted athletically, and he's been so coachable. But it's his ability to change the game on the defensive end has really been so impactful for this team. And when he plays with an edge, I've spoken to him many times. He's so nice off the court. He's a great student. It's almost like he's not as mean as he needs to be sometimes on the court. But when you see him feeling it and having that swagger, for example, the Seton Hall game, he had 7 blocks, and he was pretty talkative and just fired up in that game. When he plays with a certain edge, that teams are going to have a tough night on the offensive end. And his presence as a rim defender and just as a rebounder has been such a luxury for this program for a few years now. And he's best in space on offense when they can get him rolling off a screen, when they can get him open in transition, or Jeremiah Williams and Simpson have been really good at trying to penetrate and kind of dump off to him where opponents collapse on them with the ball. He's much better when you can't contain him when he's on the move, where he's, down on the block, posting up. He's really not comfortable doing that. He's not the best passer off of double teams. So that's how teams like to approach him. But Rutgers has kind of changed that approach now. And he's been much more aggressive and confident on the offensive end as well. So I think he's at the level now where we all hoped he would be this season. Just had a little bit of an adjustment this year, especially too without Mulcahy and Spencer, who were so good at getting him the ball in good positions. I think it's been an adjustment for this team, and just these players learning how to get him the ball in the right spots.
Yeah, I think that he'll be an excellent matchup for Stephen Crowell, Wisconsin's starting center in this game. It's if I'm remembering correctly, Amore is not listed as having more weight than Stephen Crowell is, but he's 5 inches shorter. But Crowell seems to always have issue with these like bigger centers, these guys who have more muscle on them than Crowell does. Crowell's more of a leaner guy, and I think it could be a matchup that Rutgers might be able to take advantage of here, especially considering Stephen Crowell hasn't had the best 3-game stretch of late. But when we're moving around the court, one of the things that I noticed when watching Rutgers, I actually was able to sit down and watch. I haven't watched a ton of Rutgers this year, but I was able to sit down and watch that entire Rutgers Maryland game earlier this week. One of the first things I notice is that every player, when Rutgers is on defense, seems to really be giving 100%. They bring energy to every possession there on defense. And I want to know who you think Rutgers' best on-ball defender is, because I have my own opinion of this, and but I think it's hard to choose from here, because I think it is a big part of figuring this matchup out and who might be, tasked with defending an AJ Storr one-on-one throughout the game, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, one thing Pico loves to do is he likes to take the best player out of the game, and he does that usually with a combination of players. The guards have been good. The big difference with this Rutgers team from years past is they're smaller on the perimeter, with Jermichael Davis, the freshman, he's 6'1". Noah Fernandez, just 5'11". But Derek Simpson is 6'3", but he's a little slight. Austin Williams is a guy, he's hurt right now. I don't think he's going to play in this game, but 6'4", a little bit more physical. They needed that. Now Jeremiah Williams is 6'5", and more. They have the combination of being able to switch on different guys, but Jermichael Davis on ball on the perimeter has been really, really good as a true freshman. His steal rate, but also just his disruptiveness, and he's almost like a gnat. I mean, he's so quick on his feet and fundamentally sound in terms of just getting through screens and just keeping his man in front of him. I would say overall the best defender, without a doubt, to me, even over Cliff, is Mawot Mag. Just what he brings them in so many different dimensions. He's just such an intuitive defensive player. It's like, and Kevin Willard even said this after the game, and I clipped the comment that he made about both Jeremiah and Mawot, but he said that Mawot Mag's the best defensive player he's seen in college basketball in many years. And a big part of it is he knows where to be on the floor, and his help side defense is like unparalleled in terms of you just turn around and someone gets beat and he's there. So it doesn't answer your question specifically in terms of on ball. I would say, JaMychal Davis and I think now Jeremiah Williams as well. Those two, although Simpson has improved, but overall in terms of the impact of what they mean to the Rutgers defense, I think what Mawot Mag does is no one else can really do, and has really stepped up and as he's kind of gotten the rust off from his injury, and can make up a lot of ground and make up for mistakes that other players might make, even in being maybe overly aggressive in how they defend.
Yeah, when I think about this question, my head also went right to Mawot Mag. If anybody has not watched the final possession of the Rutgers Maryland game played earlier this week, I implore you to go watch it, because that Rutgers defense was just suffocating, did not allow the Terrapins to get anything close to a quality shot off. And Mawot Mag is just running all over. I don't remember who he was defending. Maybe it was Jameer Young, maybe it was somebody else, but just is not allowing a guy to get by him. He is squared up and with his man the whole way. Mawot Mag is one of the most impressive pieces on this team, and I think he's going to be super fun to watch play at Wisconsin this week. When we're talking about some of these other pieces on the roster, I think one of the things I look at for this Rutgers team is how long of a bench rotation they've had this season. Wisconsin has some depth at certain positions. They're deep on the wing, but not necessarily deep in the front court. Their bench has been challenged in depth at the point guard position so far this year, but Rutgers has played the 57th most bench minutes this season, according to KenPom. That long rotation, I assume, is probably in part because of some of these facts that you talk about. Rutgers hasn't had its full complement of players basically all season. But how has this longer rotation been affecting Steve Pikiell's plans in game? How is it affecting Rutgers' performance throughout games throughout the season so far this year?
Yeah, I think it's been a struggle. I think that he's tried to find certain combinations. I think that he's hoped that certain players would assume certain roles that, to be honest, never really happened in some degrees. And, he also has a way of keeping players invested, by giving them sometimes a run that maybe you look at it like, why is he doing this right now? But I get his long-term strategy. And I think a lot of it, like you said, had to do with the uncertainty of statuses of certain players. They didn't know if Jeremiah Williams was ever going to be able to play. When Mawot was injured, they had a pretty deep rotation. He typically likes to play a longer rotation in non-conference play and kind of feel things out. But I think it also was disruptive at times in terms of the flow. The Michigan State game was a great example. At Michigan State, the starters got them back into it there. I think they were down one or two possessions with about 13, 14 minutes to play. And he brought in three bench players and they completely fell apart. And that was all she wrote. I think it was like an 18-2 run or something terrible. So there have been complaints from the fan base in terms of hockey substitutions and such like that. But it's also been a noticeable difference since Jeremiah's been back, is that he's tightened up the rotation pretty tightly. The starting lineup has changed a little bit. Andre Hyatt has been starting all season, and I would argue has been their most consistent player. He's now coming off the bench, which I do think is a better, more natural spot for him as the sixth man. I thought last year at times he was one of the best sixth men in the conference, and I think to have him as your sixth man just shows better depth. And then Gavin Griffiths, high-profile freshman that has struggled for the majority of the season, but he's starting to come around a little bit. He's playing the seventh most minutes. Those guys are both playing around 20 minutes a game. The starters are inching towards 30 minutes, where you're not seeing 10 guys play double-digit minutes anymore, at least in the last two games. And I think that's intentional with what he has now at his disposal with the roster. He's starting three guards, playing, in terms of Derek Simpson, Jeremiah Williams, and JaMychal Davis. I think that's I think what we're seeing now is his vision of what this roster could be, and finally has the opportunity to do that. So he has a history of playing a longer rotation, but I think being crunch time and where this team is positioned, he's made a very conscious change after the Penn State loss 2 games ago. it was the worst performance this season. He said he was going to reevaluate everything, and he certainly has. And you see that in how he's executed the rotations since then.
Well, let's talk about crunch time in this game as Rutgers goes into crunch time this season, as you say. I imagine with the slow pace at which Wisconsin plays on offense, the tough presence that Rutgers plays with on defense, I imagine this one's going to come down to the wire. And if it does, Rutgers is going to come out of this game on top if what happens.
Well, when they have a lead down the stretch, they've been, they have not been a great free throw shooting team this season, but a lot of that has to do with who's at the line, and they're able to control things better down the stretch when they have a lead. Derek Simpson is their best free throw shooter. He's, 85% plus right now. Noah Fernandez gets subbed in, in those situations. He's an 80% free throw shooter. Andre Hyatt has been, 75%-ish. So having those guys on the floor down the stretch, they've really come through when they've had a tight lead. And then even Mawat Mag against Maryland this week, Simpson wrongly passed out of a triple team. He should have just held the ball and taken the foul. He passed it to Mawat. But Mawat, to his credit, came through and hit both free throws, and he's solid he's around 70%. So, the big guys on Rutgers and a couple of the freshmen have not been good from the line. But when you put the ball in the hands of your best players down the stretch, they've come through from the foul line. I think now with Jeremiah Williams, if Rutgers has a lead, they're going to attack. Their spacing's been a lot better with Jeremiah Williams now. And between Simpson and Williams, they almost alternate drives in terms of finding the gap and getting to the rim, and either, getting the shot close to the rim or trying to find Cliff on a dump off. I think that's been their strategy. They've run into trouble all season with mid-range jumpers, and they've shot 2-point percentage. They were actually in the KenPom era. They were tracking there for a while before, like maybe 3 games ago, as the worst 2-point shooting team in Big Ten play in the KenPom era. They were like 38%. Now they're up to like 41%. But, they shot 50% from the floor against Maryland in the second half, which is a very good defense. So it gives a little bit of hope. They are taking better shots now with Williams in the fold. So, I think that if it's a close game, if they have a 1-possession lead, I like their chances, especially with that RAC crowd. The biggest thing for Rutgers is that they've had really slow starts, and that's hurt. That's negated the RAC crowd at times too. So they typically come back in the second half, but not needing to have such a effort given to make that double-digit comeback will be huge in this game. If they can just, trade baskets for a while, keep it within 5 or 6 points. I really like their ability to take over the game in the second half with their defense that tends to wear teams down. And as you know, the RAC is pretty crazy. But I think getting the right guys at the line late in the game is going to be huge.
It's funny that you talk about wanting to just get through the first few minutes trading baskets in this game, because Tyler Wall, Wisconsin's starting power forward, he was asked after the Michigan game about how he thought the team started, and he specifically said, we need to start better than just allowing teams to trade the first few baskets with us, was what he said. We can't let teams believe that they can keep up with us. I just thought that was a very
great answer.
Interesting that you went right to that when Tyler Wall went a very similar direction, talking about how Wisconsin needs to start out a little bit better and not just trade baskets with teams. But the other point you made about shot selection is also one that I think Wisconsin has had some struggles with so far this year, and I think is part of the way Wisconsin wins this game. I think Wisconsin wants to play this game through the paint. If they can go at Clifford Amori and try to, get him into foul trouble. Amori's not like a Zach Edey, where Zach Edey just also never fouls, or at least never gets called for fouls. Amori can, get some fouls committed from time to time. If Wisconsin comes out strong, I think they're going to have a better chance in this one, trying to play through. And like you said, the free throw advantage really does go Wisconsin's way. There was a while this season that Wisconsin was averaging more made free throws than teams were averaging free throw attempts against them.
Don't tell me that. I don't like
it has come back down to earth as Wisconsin has stopped getting to the line as much this season. But if they're able to do it, I think Wisconsin has a chance in this game. So I guess look for two teams that are just running at the hoop in this one. Let the whistle blow, I guess.
Yeah,
Should be a
defending
fun one.
without fouling has been really key for Rutgers. When they do get a liberal whistle, they have struggled, and teams get to the bonus 10, 12 minutes to go in the game. That's a problem against a team like Wisconsin. So certainly is something that I'm concerned about in this game. You are at home, so hopefully you get a little bit of a home whistle.
Yeah.
But obviously they're very physical inside defensively, and Clifford can be guilty of that at times in terms of leaving his feet, or even just kind of not being as disciplined and maybe having a unnecessary foul that is costly. So I think that's a huge key in this game, is if Wisconsin can get Rutgers in a little bit of foul trouble and make them pay from the line.
I think that sounds about right. All right, Aaron, I have one last fun question for you before we go. Before we get off of the game here, is there anything else about this matchup that you wanted to talk about? Anything you wish I had asked you as we wrap up here?
No, I mean, I'm a big fan of this series. I enjoy watching Wisconsin. I feel like this is like as Big Ten of a matchup as you can get in terms of the style. This is just a great opportunity. It's fascinating, just the dynamic of the matchup, just because of Wisconsin's losing streak, even though they're having a very good year, and Rutgers really left for dead by even their own fans. A lot of people had given up at this point, and then to see them kind of inch their way forward, this could really be a game that changes the dynamic of the season. They have Northwestern at home after this. Then they go to Minnesota, which rare place that, they seem to be winning all their home games right now, but I know Wisconsin won there. If there's any hope in Rutgers kind of making a postseason run, they have to have this game. So it's a huge game for both sides, and I'm just excited to watch it.
Yeah, Rutgers won back-to-back games after losing 3 straight. Wisconsin on a 3 straight losing streak of its own. It feels like a little bit of a turning point either way for both teams here. But before we go, Aaron, I want to ask you about this little matrix I am throwing on the screen here. All right. The Big Ten came out with its new scheduling format as the 18-team Big Ten will come into existence. They're going to stick at 20 games, which means every team is going to play 17 games in the season, alternating home and away with all 17 teams, plus 3 additional games. It sounds like the conference is going to just rotate through. You play 2 games a year against every team, like on a 6-year rolling basis, which feels ridiculous to me. That feels like too many years to go through. So instead, I'm saying let's preserve some of the regionality of the conference. Let's preserve some rivalry within the conference. You're going to play every team in the conference once. Your remaining 3 games are going to be 3 permanent Big Ten basketball rivals for Rutgers. And I know some of these East Coast teams don't fit super pretty, but we're going to try our best here. I want to get your opinion on Rutgers, which, is gone because of this banner. There we go. I'm so sorry. Rutgers is going to play Maryland, Penn State, and Purdue on an annual basis. Rutgers, Maryland feels natural. Rutgers, Penn State, you can throw a little bit of the old A10 vibes in there. And then Purdue, I have as kind of a foil to Indiana going to play Maryland every year as a recreation of that national title game. What do you think, Aaron?
I'm all for the regionality, and I love the A10 shout out by you. I'm old enough to date myself that I was at the 1989 Atlantic 10 Championship when they beat Penn State to go to the NCAA tournament. Last time you'll ever play on your home court to go to the NCAA tournament, earn an automatic berth. So that's a little fun tidbit. But I would say let's switch Purdue with Indiana. Obviously, Rutgers and Purdue have had a lot of classic games. Rutgers actually, believe it or not, and I know you know this, but had success against Purdue, which is pretty crazy. But they've dominated Indiana, and honestly, as much as fun it is to beat other teams in this conference, there's no other team for Rutgers fans that's more fun right now to beat than Indiana. They've won 9 of 11. Indiana fan base was extremely, let's just say, not happy about Rutgers joining the Big Ten, and they were very good at making that known. And there was certainly some bitterness in that rivalry. And to see, well, they would be even offended that I called it a rivalry. So for Rutgers, what they've done since the 2018 Big Ten tournament when they beat them at the Garden, it's been unbelievable. I mean, 9 of 11 is just ridiculous. So I would say let's switch that. But yeah, I mean, I think probably you'd have to say that's fair if it was Purdue, simply because, Penn State's been down, although they had a good year last year. And by the way, Rutgers cannot win at Penn State other than last year's ridiculous comeback. They always lose there. But yeah, I like the idea. One thing that, from just ranting here, Michigan State is the only team that hasn't played at the Rack in the last 3 seasons. I don't know how
that's interesting.
did it. They lost by 30 at the Rack in their last game, and he hasn't come back. So they played at the Garden last year. There's a conspiracy theory that he called the league office, and so I'll throw that in the mix. I wish they played them more at the Rack. But yeah, I like your grid. It makes a lot of sense, and I think it makes more sense to play the same 3 teams, at least maybe not every year, because I get that would be, imbalanced. But at the same time, I like the idea of garnering rivalries, and I think Maryland for Rutgers is a natural one that Maryland fans don't want to agree on. But, Rutgers had they've won 3 in a row now in College Park. So, yeah, I like what you did there.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I don't think Rutgers is going to be happy with Maryland's not going to be happy with pretty much anything. They just don't have any real history playing any of these teams in the conference, right? Like,
yeah, it's true.
Oh well, it is what it is. All right, Aaron, thank you so much for joining the show. If you would like to tell the folks where to find more of your work, we can wrap it up here.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. It's the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm on all, platforms that we hear podcasts. Also have a YouTube channel. And, my Twitter is Aaron_Breitman, Instagram, Scarlet Faithful. And appreciate having me on, and looking forward to the matchup. And we'll do it again in Madison in a couple of weeks, I guess.
Yeah, we sure will. Thanks so much, Aaron. I appreciate it. This has been the Scotty Six Pack Podcast. I'm your host, Kedrick Stumbris. You can follow me on the website, formerly known as Twitter, at Kedrick Stumbris. Follow the podcast at Scotty Six Pack for the latest updates in Wisconsin sports. We will talk to you all again very soon as we recap this game. We'll also go live on Spaces at halftime to talk about what's good or maybe what's going poorly for the Badgers. Until then, on Wisconsin.